McLaren did not reiterate its superb performance at the Belgium Grand Prix that was demonstrated at Silverstone and then reaffirmed in Hungary. The dry track on Sunday caused problems for the MCL60, with Norris struggling for race speed and vulnerable on the Kemmel straight. Many people have been left wondering how this could happen. Why didn't they have any new parts ready for their low-drag race? Well, Andrea Stella's team concentrated significantly on wet conditions, with a considerably more changed configuration at the rear wing, which placed the car in trouble in the fast sections of Sector 1 and 3. This was all because new parts are still being produced and will completely change the MCL60 for the remainder of the season. Will they be a true race win contender after the summer break? McLaren's aerodynamic compromise for the Belgian GP disadvantaged the Papaya car. The rear wing was the same as it had been in the previous rounds, both at high-load tracks and at quicker, medium-load tracks. This configuration had given us an advantage in the previous days, but in the race became a big problem. It was a misjudgment, admitted Andrea Stella. In this regard, the Woking team has not demonstrated much diversity in terms of options to bring to the track. The only significant changes were the aerodynamic arrangement of the beam wing and a tiny notch in the exit profile of the mobile wing. In the case of a wet track, McLaren's charged compromise had a larger functioning range, with Norris and Piastri's car managing to compensate for the slowness on the straights in mixed circumstances. On the other hand, in the dry, the deck constricted so much that it was impossible to compensate for the performance disadvantage suffered in the first and final sector, and the MCL60 was sluggish and very easy to overtake. It became evident that McLaren's ideal window needed load assistance from the back wing for the time being. As a result, the MCL60 used nearly the same wing throughout the season. We could have maybe reduced the drag a bit, but the conditions for the race weren't clear. Downloading would also have meant not being as efficient as possible on other fronts. We preferred to use the car in the way it works best at the moment, reiterated Andrea Stella. Running a weekend in the dark without the option of extensive dry runs was not ideal for McLaren in its attempt to do something unusual to boost speed without disturbing the car's balance. We could have perhaps reduced the drag a bit, but the conditions for the race weren't clear, and that would have also meant not being as efficient as possible. We prefer to use the car in the way it works best at the moment, Andrea Stella said. Obviously, for a dry race, you do want to race with less drag. I don't think that there is a correlation between the fact that we focused on the upgrades and the decision that you make on setup once we arrived at Spa. The real correlation is the fact that because we were busy working on other things, we didn't have the time to work on low-drag rear wings. That is the real correlation, and the rest is not correlated with the fact that we were busy in developing the car. We were expecting the vulnerability, but when we were in the mix with other cars, it was starting to spiral negatively quite rapidly. We have to very frankly admit that while this configuration gave us an advantage on Friday and Saturday, it was a significant issue in the race. We didn't help ourselves by trying to give Lando free air and fitting hard tyres. Although, as a counterpart, because we had enough downforce in the middle sector, this is why we were able to extend the stint on the soft tyres so long and retain competitiveness even when the rubber was almost finished. It's not like we necessarily wanted to target this configuration. Fixing the efficiency of the car at low drag is on the to-do list, but it was lower than some other priorities that we have worked on in previous months. So McLaren's inconsistent recent results, according to Lando Norris, are the result of the team effectively building a whole new car for the second half of the season. I don't think we had optimal wing settings, Norris told media when asked to explain this slow pace at Spa-Francorchamps. We just haven't been able to focus on what we wanted to because we bought a whole new car, and all of the focus was on doing that, which is the correct thing to do, because there's only 3 or 4 races which are probably as low downforce as this. The Briton also expressed optimism regarding McLaren's underperformance at Spa, stating that it was preferable to be competitive at certain tracks rather than none, as had been the case earlier in the season. All of our focus was on just trying to deliver the new car that we've had a few weeks ago, and that's clearly delivered us 2 podiums, said Norris. I'd much rather take that and have a couple of bad weekends than just be below par the whole time. The return of the championship should witness the launch of a further evolutionary step on the MCL60, as indicated by Stella in Belgium, as part of the work to bring the real MCL60 on the track. But now comes the most difficult part of the English team's technicians, taking that final step in which teams like Ferrari and Aston Martin, but also Mercedes, have stagnated by failing to connect with Red Bull. We're talking about the crucial quest for efficiency at low load levels, which severely curtailed the performance of the Ferrari F175, then the SF23, and finally the Aston Martin AMR23. Andrea Stella has indicated that some of the improvements coming in the second half of the season would be aimed at improving the efficiency of the MCL60 with various aerodynamic configurations. This is what many technicians have said when asked about Red Bull and how the RB19 manages to stand out from the competition. McLaren will utilise a more particular rear wing beginning with Monza, as stated by the team principal himself. We are working on some mitigations for Monza, which we were not able to finish here in time. So we assume we'll be in better shape for Monza and have even more time for Vegas. However, it will not be the only upgrade aimed at increasing the MCL60's efficiency. A succession of more structural and less technical changes will be delivered to various tracks. It should be noticed that the Woking team's car looks a lot like the Red Bull RB19. Changes will be made not just on an aerodynamic level, but also on a mechanical level. This final phase in development is undoubtedly the most difficult for experts throughout the industry to complete. This is not limited to McLaren. Any team that can grasp this area will be able to ensure a solid approach to Red Bull. In this case, they would show that the new regulations provide a lot of space for advancement for teams in a more challenging but equally fast method than the old cars. So ahead of an important turning point for the team, as it prepares to test its 2024 car in its new wind tunnel for the first time, the team intends to make one more push with its current MCL60. Beyond the specific low drag solutions that will be required for high-speed courses like Monza and Las Vegas later this year, team principal Andrea Stella believes there will be more changes to assist the team build on recent podium successes in the United Kingdom and Hungary. We're working on evolution of these concepts for post-shutdown, he said. There is another kind of round of changes to the bodywork and floor. We still have to sign this off and we have a few more days of work, but if we are successful, then we will definitely attempt to bring it in one of the events soon after the shutdown. Although the last update outperformed even McLaren's expectations, he is fully aware that the next one may not offer as much as promised. I think we kind of understand what happened with this one, but what we're working on is not only simple millimeters, it is a bit of a conceptual evolution, he said. So there's a degree of uncertainty with aerodynamic evolutions, and really, the evidence comes only when you test these kinds of things trackside, because even if you have a good wind tunnel correlation and good CFD correlation, you're always a little bit on the edge of knowledge. And I think this is the same for every team. The 2023 car is nearing completion as McLaren prepares to test a first prototype of its 2024 competitor in its new wind tunnel in Woking. The team is still deciding whether to undertake it this week or after its mandated summer rest period, but it will happen before F1 returns to Zandvoort later this month. Stella claims that this point marks the start of development for next year, since the team will avoid moving its 2023 competitor across from the Toyota facility it has utilised in recent years. We'll stop working on the old car as we leave the Toyota wind tunnel, he said. We'll not run the old car in the new wind tunnel. What we are working on with this year's car, a lot of things are relevant for next year, but this year's model will not be put in the new wind tunnel. The new wind tunnel will only have next year's model. While other teams have discussed utilising concepts from their 2024 cars on this year's challenges, Stella is unconvinced that McLaren will be able to do so. On next year's model, there's not much you can develop that you can apply to this year's car, because things are very interlinked and tangled, he said. It's very difficult to have a solution that works on next year's car, and then you can apply to this year's car. You would certainly consider a test item to see if it works, but even to prepare a test item, it means that somebody will have to release it, draw it, and produce it in a period in which we are completely flat out on next year, so I see it unlikely. So the big question is, will McLaren return from the summer break with new upgrades? The answer to that is yes, but we'll have to wait and see what the competition brings to Zandvoort to know if McLaren's upgrades will push them to the front of the grid again. At least they're making big strides right now, and the introduction of a new and own wind tunnel will certainly help them in the coming years. It will be interesting to see their development in the upcoming years. What are your thoughts on McLaren's season so far? Are you excited by their return to the front? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.